The 80s were a hell of a drug, for not only did we see a rebirth of the slasher horror, but a renaissance for the horror genre as well. 1981 would give us some of horror's best movies, possibly even sequels, such as Halloween 2, Friday the 13th, Part 2, a classic such as An American Werewolf in London. But for today, the subject is The Evil Dead. This film is technically a remake of Sam Raimi's earlier works, known as Within the Woods. The Evil Dead follows Ash and his friends venturing off into a cabin in the woods for their fun trip. At first, it can seem a bit slow, but it's worth it, as the film builds up the cast and creates the illusion of a trip to the woods from being a happy vacation to what would turn out to be a horrific nightmare. We see the seeds being planted very slowly in the beginning. When they're driving across the bridge, Ash notices that it's slowly falling apart, giving off the impression that something is wrong. But we don't know yet, because the horror slowly starts to build up, and that's what I really do love about this film. It doesn't give you all the jump scares, it doesn't show you all the gore, it's not violent in your face. It's not all about that. While some of that stuff is shown, it's done in a way that at the time of the 80s felt different. Instead of being on the trend of the 80s where everything has to happen at that instant, it takes its time to piece the story the way it wants to get the audience invested with its characters. Much like Ridley Scott's Alien and John Carpenter's Halloween, it wants you to get invested to its storytelling, and it wants you to be disturbed with everything that comes into fruition. The characters of the Evil Dead are pretty interesting in some ways, while they aren't really built upon greatly. They fit the story, and the actors and actresses give their best, and in doing so, make certain scenes feel very special. Like, for instance, I love the dynamic between Ash and Scotty, because they're both best friends, and their chemistry feels real. For certain scenes, such as the cellar, when they come across the Necronomicon, it feels very campy, but it works because both Ash and Scotty give genuine reactions to coming across the Book of the Dead. They seem scared and quite possibly confused, as they've never come across a book like the Necronomicon Ex Mortis. These are just my thoughts, but in my opinion, Ash and Scotty are executed really well as characters. I think the writing is well done, and the performances they give are really great as well, regardless of how bad and awful sometimes they are. Because this is a really good horror movie, and it's really cheesy. But Ash goes from being this bumbling buffoon and idiot to the kind-hearted, caring idiot that the franchise would go to build off of. Whereas Scotty, well, he looked like a promising protagonist in many ways. Due to the actions that he took in this film, it didn't really go the way that he wanted to. One of the many reasons being an asshole.
Look, I'm getting out. I don't care what happens to her. She's your girlfriend, you take care of her.
What can I really say about Linda and Shelley? While they are both Ash and Scotty's girlfriends in this film, their characters feel more like plot devices in a way that help flesh out Ash and Scotty. But Linda, on the other hand, her relationship with Ash is seen and developed really, really well, in my opinion, due to the fact that Bruce Campbell and Betsy Baker do an amazing job at making the relationship feel as real as it can get. They're both really goofy and cheesy with the lines that they're given, but their performance is what honestly nails the whole relationship story for me. Whereas for Cheryl, Ash's sister plays a pretty big role for this movie, as not only does she cause the demise and downfall of various characters in this movie, but as a character, Cheryl is one that the audience can sympathize and empathize for, as the events that lead up to her are something that those in the horror industry and cinema would refer to as punishing the audience. And it's quite depressing because her character role is also used to help build Ash, and it messes with him as well, because everything that happens in this movie feels like a tragic tale. You are now entering spoiler territory, and if you do not wish to be spoiled and robbed of an experience, I suggest you skip to the timestamp in this slide. For those of you who stayed, you are now about to enter the point of no return. Going back into earlier statements that I made, such as Ash and Scotty's friendship and how they come across the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, not only do they make the mistake of being curious, but also they made a grave mistake. Due to listening to the audio tape, they caused all hell to break loose. And as a result, Cheryl is the first to be attacked by the evil dead. She's tortured mentally and physically. Cheryl's hand gets possessed. While this may have looked campy, cheesy, or not even scary, if you were in her shoes, this would have been a terrifying sight. Moving on, I Can't Show You is one of the most gruesome actions used in a horror movie, and it still disturbs me to this day. Cheryl makes the worst decision of going out to investigate what could possibly be causing all the noises that she's hearing. And once she steps outside and makes the decision of going alone, like almost every horror cliche, which is one of the worst decisions you can possibly make, she's not only just attacked by the trees, but she's viciously raped by the trees themselves. Now, I don't feel comfortable showing you guys this scene. This scene alone is one that still disturbs me to this day, and you would have to watch it just to understand. If I had to compare how terrifying this scene felt for me, I would have to compare it to movies such as The Exorcist,
of our Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit. Damien!
or recently Ari Aster's Midsommar, because of one scene in particular. After Cheryl is finally able to free herself from the trees, she tries her best to run back to the cabin, and boy did she get lucky, because she barely makes it back. And once she's there, Cheryl informs everyone of the events that just happened. Linda then inserts herself and she tries her best to calm down Cheryl, but Cheryl is not having any of it, and she says no, because Cheryl is trying to tell them and convince them that there's something outside in those woods. Ash dismisses her, while everyone else is just confused. Cheryl then says she wants to leave because she doesn't feel safe there anymore. Ash agrees to take his sister back home into town since Scotty doesn't want to. And from there, Ash and Cheryl drive into those woods, hoping to get across that bridge and make it back home safely. But little did they know that that bridge was completely destroyed and wrecked, which means they're stuck and there's nowhere else to run. Once back inside the cabin is when things really start to pick up the pace. Linda and Shelley go from having a fun game of guessing cards until something frightening occurs.
Queen of Spades. 4 of Hearts. 8 of Spades. 2 of Spades. Jack of Diamonds. Jack of Clubs.
Possessed Cheryl starts attacking everyone, leaving no one unnoticed. Ash got his butt handed to him. Scotty saves his life. Together they lock Cheryl in the basement, and moments later, Scotty has to fight his now possessed girlfriend, Shelley, in what is a pretty heartbreaking scene. Well, even though she wasn't built upon as greatly as a lot of us would have wanted, it's a really heartbreaking scene because it shows how far one has to go, even if the person possessed is someone they care for and love. Having witnessed all the horrors around him, Ash decides to fight back against the evil dead. He saw his girlfriend become a deadite in front of his very own eyes. He witnessed the death of his friend Scotty in what came off as a heart-wrenching scene, regardless of how much an asshole Scotty was, as well as being tricked by the deadites and thinking that his girlfriend and sister were back to normal. Instead, it was a trick, like I mentioned. A trick that somewhat worked, but didn't. Ash managed to see through it. He fought back and put a valiant effort against them, but it broke him in a sense, because while he didn't kill Linda at first, he wanted to give her a proper burial, showing that he still did love her, even if she did try to kill him. But it doesn't work, and inevitably he has to do it. There was nothing else that he could do. Linda, at that point, was gone. She was a demon, hell-bent on trying to kill Ash. Suddenly, Ash is attacked by Cheryl because she manages to free herself. Or did she? Because now, Scotty became a deadite, and together, they beat the holy hell out of Ash. And yet, Ash manages to persevere and beat the evil dead in what is honestly one of the coolest and most memorable scenes in this movie and horror cinema as well. In the final events of the film, Ash believes that he's free and that he can go home and nothing's gonna happen. But the movie ends with what is possibly the biggest slap to the face, because again, this is a horror movie, and not every horror movie has a happy ending.
Woe is me, got to put my cheaters on. Creepers, creepers, where'd you get those creepers? Oh, those weepers. How they hit the time? Knock me out. Where'd you get those eyes? Where'd you get them? Won't you put me one? Don't you try, man. Ain't you advertise?